Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us to the virtual roundtable series of the Platinum community that is taking place every 2 weeks. Before we start, I would like to inform you that all attendees will have their cameras turned off and their microphones on mute. You will be given a space for questions using the questions and answer tool located at the bottom of the screen. Today's topic is remittances to Latin America and South Asia. We are honored to have as a moderator Mr. Hugo Cuevas-Mohr, Director of the Platinum Network. And our panelists are Dr. Sabith Khan, Professor at Cal Lutheran University, Dr. Roy Germano, Senior Research Scholar at NYU, and Dr. Daisha Merritt, Department Chair of Management and Technology at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Thank you, and let's get started. Mr. Cuevas-Mohr, please begin our session.
Okay, so good morning, everyone who is in the West Coast. It's very early, like Sabith, who is in just woke up. And then we are in the East Coast, Daisha and me, we are in Florida. And so we have attendees also in Europe, so they are in their afternoon. So welcome everybody. I'm so happy and so proud of this virtual roundtable, especially because this is our first IORM roundtable, and I want to introduce briefly IORM so I don't take too much time of Sabith and Daisha's presentation, and Roy, who joined us and got in but got out. He will be joining us soon again. But IORM was an idea that really sprouted out of conversations with Roy Germano first, who attended IMTC World in 2018 and presented his book and signed books for the attendees. And then Sabith, I met him at an event in Mexico that SEMLA did. So I say hi to our friends in SEMLA in Mexico, and we met, and then we started talking. It was just you know, nice conversation we had. He came to IMTC World last year in Miami. He attended the course that I was teaching there. So having a professor, Sabith, just sitting as an attendee, as a student in my course was just an honor. And then we started talking about the lack of organization with scholars and researchers in the area of remittances and migration, and we kind of looked for one. There was nothing there. We started talking about forming one, and then with discussions, especially with Sabith and his leadership there, we kind of came up with, okay, let's throw this, let's look at this, let's do it. And we're just in baby steps, really. I mean, we already have a board of directors. We're working on this. We have a number of people growing around us, joining this. So I'm not going to say much. I'm just going to say thank you, Sabith and Roy, for working with me in this idea. IMTC, PNIT, More World Consulting, all what the group that I lead is on, is really very happy to support this idea and take it forward. We don't know where we will go. Organizations grow like that organically from people just talking and sharing ideas. We have had some meetings with the members that have been so interesting, and for me, you know, who is outside the world of research or academics, is fascinating. I was very early in my career a high school teacher. so for me it is, and I try to teach at every IMTC something about what I know and my experience in remittances. I'm not going to say more, Just so glad to be here. Look at your faces, see what we've gone up, and thank you all the attendees that are here today. We're gonna have questions from you. There is a question you can ask them. We will work with them as we go through this morning. This is our first IORM one. We will have more in the future. We have invited also IORM to IMTC World 2020, which will be a virtual event in November 16 to 19. So IORM will have 2 sessions during the event, and that also will be very interesting as we grow these organizations. Please just go iorm.org, IOREM.org. Just go online. You can, there's a form there. You can become a member. Right now, it's just a pretty open membership. It's just like, hey, I want to participate with you. I want to help you. And that's just fine. So, Sabith, let me introduce you. Please introduce yourself and let us know about the book that you just published and with Daisha. And great, go on.
Thank you, Hugo, and thank you all for joining us this beautiful morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Sabith Khan, and I am an assistant professor and program director at Cal Lutheran, a small liberal arts university in Southern California. And my co-author here is on the call, Dr. Daisha Merritt, who's actually in Florida. And we will present for about 10 to 15 minutes based on our book. And Daisha, do you want to introduce yourself, and then perhaps Roy can go next?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Daisha Merritt. I am the Associate Department Chair in the College of Business at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University down here in Daytona, Florida. Very excited to be here and to meet all of you, both within this roundtable, but also just offline as well. So I'm glad that we have a pretty good turnout and that we could be kind of the first, maybe not guinea pig, but first roundtable talk, the 3 of us, as we kick off this year. So thank you for being here. Roy, do you want to go ahead and introduce?
Hi, everybody. My name is Roy Germano. I teach in the International Relations program at New York University. And I also am a senior research scholar at the NYU School of Law. And I'm really excited to be part of this organization. I met Hugo a couple years ago at IMTC. Lots of fun. Got to know Sabith and Daisha through our meetings. And this is a necessary organization that I don't think has ever existed before. So very happy to be a part of it and be a part of this first event.
Great. Good.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're gonna share your screen, Daisha?
Yep, there we go.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
All right.
All right, so we've divided this presentation between the 2 of us, and we'll split screens as we move along, but we just want to set the context of where this book, so basically we're presenting from our most recent book, which was published by Routledge last month. And Daisha, you want to go to the next screen? Yeah, thank you. So this is the book that we're talking about, Remittances and International Development, the Invisible Forces Shaping Community. So essentially, we've looked at 4 countries. We looked at 2 of the largest corridors in the world, US and Mexico and Saudi Arabia and India, looking at them as case studies. So we did sort of an in-depth case study analysis using qualitative as well as quantitative data. We looked at some of the key issues impacting remittances in these 2 regions, which I'm sure all of you are aware are among the most influential and most important regions. And having experience living, working, and also sending money to these regions, I have had the privilege of living in UAE for about 2 years. I was raised in India, so I would like to believe a fairly good understanding of the Indian system, the economy, and society, as well as now being in the US for about 12 years now. I think personally, I've experienced these issues as well as even as a scholar. So we felt this could be an interesting book. And just as a background, Daisha and myself, we have written a few papers together. We go back many years to an organization called ARNOA, which is a collaborative of scholars studying civil society issues, and it's a truly global organization again. So what the book really covers is, first off, it covers a synthesis of the literature in the field. Again, we want to be careful what we claim. It's not a synthesis of all the literature, but literature which speaks to issues of development, community building, and policy. So we've sort of looked at these three broad areas. And as I pointed out earlier, we are trying to look at these two pairs of countries, 4 countries, but 2 pairs, because we believe these are illustrative of some of the larger phenomena that are ongoing in the space of not just remittances, but also international development and philanthropy. And one of the arguments we make in our previous work, as well as even in the book, is that philanthropy and remittances should be seen together. They should be seen as a manifestation of similar phenomenon. And I think our real contribution, if there is one, is to theory building. I think we have tried to argue from a theoretical standpoint using data that we need to look at remittances in a slightly different way than the discourses that we're used to. So just a little about ourselves and our academic background. We've introduced ourselves, so I won't spend too much time on this. Next slide, Daisha. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
That's great. Excellent. So I think one of the things before I switch to the next slide is kind of how like we came together. And I know that Dr. Khan has kind of mentioned how we met and how we came to this roundtable, but how did we actually come to the book that we wrote? And it really stems from these untold stories of remittances. We both have very different backgrounds, but yet some common ground to build on. And in inspiration for this book and this piece of literature, that we wanted to figure out ways to make connections, as Dr. Khan said, and we believe that there is a need for both that practitioner-produced literature on remittances, such as that coming out of the World Bank and think tanks like SEMLA in Mexico City, for example, but also that academic research to help us understand this multifaceted phenomenon. So between those people, I have my hands up like you can see my hands, sorry about that. Between those working in the field and the academic studying, the gap is ever present between that people's voice, the direct impacts, those externalities, the positive, negative, and even neutral, but externalities nonetheless, from the vantage point of the recipient, the sender, the remitter. What are their gains and their losses, the troubles and the circumstances? In many countries, there are specific directives in collecting this incoming data, or at least a sampling of the incoming monies. And even a few, let me emphasize the word few here, track the monetary funds down to the municipal level at times. But those numbers are still numbers and they impact people. So one of the large contributions that our research has added are narratives, those first-person dialogues. The dialogues of what is happening to them and how it's happening to them. So now keep in mind, my co-author and I are definitely writing this book from the US perspective and from an academic perspective, but we still wanted to kind of capture or start to capture that qualitative aspect, and then include those findings and make connections or attempt to make connections to reason what is going on, what is happening. And to that end, we crafted many open-ended questions that we wanted to have conversations with people. And I should note here that we wanted to have conversations with individuals from multiple different stakeholder perspectives, but we went to them where possible instead of them coming to us, which is a little different of a strategy, because we wanted them to feel comfortable in their own landscapes and their own home environments. We asked questions like simple, open-ended questions of, what do you think? What patterns do you expect? And are there seasons? Is that even a thing? Is there seasons for remittances? And kind of build the discussion and build our arguments around that. As you can see on your screen, 3 photos capturing different experiences, yet built on common ground, or maybe the word is more common need. On the left is a bracero in rural Oaxaca. In the middle is a returned migrant worker, a Mexican migrant worker. And then on the right is Pete. Pete is a representative of a firm that manufactures machines that operate as an ATM. And honestly, if without the trained eye, if I walked by this machine, I would think it was just a ATM, but it actually is a money transfer device. From these individuals and the discussions we had, I'm going to offer some direct quotes here. So here's a direct quote. It was originally in Spanish, but translated to English. The short duration I spent in the US helped my family a lot. I went to the US a total of 3 times as a bracero and saved up enough money to buy a small piece of land. The remittances helped pay for my kids' education too, and now there are 3 professional kids in my family working as nurses and educators. Another direct quote, again originally in Spanish but translated in English, is, I think the US government should regularize contract workers so there is no illegal migration. Crossing the borders is dangerous and several people die each year. So being able to collect and capture these life stories for Dr. Khan and I was really integral to part of our publication mindset and part of this book. These events are part and parcel of the strength that this book is providing. And as you can see as the photos on your screen, they're really just simply a snapshot, a teeny tiny portion of that untold story, but still a portion nonetheless. It's an attempt to collect a more complete story of remittances, if you will, and to connect that, and here's the academic lens perhaps, connect that to the financial institution data and the statistics that may potentially illuminate points that are up and down within the remittance landscape. And to this point, we argue within our book, many points we argue actually, but we argue that it needs to be viewed from a whole picture perspective. As stated earlier, a more complete story. We find that remittances are part of development. Not only do they aid in community development, but that they are motivators to continue cultural traditions. Let's pause. I am sure you are asking yourself, did I just hear her correctly? I just said that remittances are motivators to keep cultural tradition. And you did. You heard me absolutely correct. Our research findings assert that remittances are direct motivators and in some instances help preserve tradition, preserve culture, and continue on with those roots. I think there's probably a good thought point here and a probably longer discussion to be had, but I did want to make that really big main point that we did come across, and hopefully we can have some more robust discussion after the presentation on it, but let that sink in a little bit. So also contained in our research, as you see on the screen, but we have found that policies do not match up with the need. Policies are difficult to interpret, and at times it's not about understanding the policies for the remitter or the recipient, but rather just doing as told. And that's a pretty big point as well. I mean, doing something as told without understanding the wraparounds is a huge disconnect. Those, as my before mentioned quote alluded to, people have the real opinions, and there have been efforts of advocacy to shape have a voice, and we directly argue that policies in general need to be overhauled. To add to this and kind of support that argument, finding data, quantitative data, let me make that distinction, was not easy. We definitely thank the countries and companies and individuals who provided figures, but it was a much longer and drawn out process than we had originally conceived. Therefore, one of the recommendations of our book is finding a central point, a data warehouse, a place to collect multi-country data, to extract multi-country data, and provide access to the larger public and community. And to this point, both Dr. Khan and I, as I'm sure probably everybody on the call, are super excited that there has already been some movements to start in this effort. Nothing has come completely to fruition, but there has been other talk around this. So, hey, our book was only published last month, and already a recommendation is coming out of it. So that is pretty awesome. But before I get to the next steps and action, let us take a moment to look at the remittance landscape and growth, with an emphasis on growth. Did you know that remittances sent back to migrants are 3 times the size of international development aid? And research in remittances has only just begun to take momentum within the academic realm. I'm sure if there is anybody on here who has ever talked to a researcher besides those sitting in front of you, you probably, especially if you were in the US, had to explain what the word remittances meant. We do not have that word in US English as a normal word. We talk about diaspora communities, we talk about private money transfers, but the actual word remittances. So oddly enough, within the academic community, again, where we come from, we have to have a whole verbiage discussion before we can even get to, do you want to talk about remittances? So, but nonetheless, it is gaining momentum. And in 2019, annual remittance flows from low and middle income countries were likely to reach $550 billion, which made remittance flow larger than foreign direct investment. Note that it was expected to be a large growth in remittances, because we believed, as we saw from 2017 to 2018, there was a 9.6% increase between 2017 and 2018, with another projected and realized increase for 2019. I say and realized because the actual number was $554 billion in remittance flows in 2019. However, this growth was expected to continue and continue, but then the pandemic hit. And the world definitely changed with our challenges. So now I must mention that our book was published this year, and there's already now a need to update our book. And it was literally published, I think, 4 weeks ago, but because of the current pandemic. And as of April of 2020, so this year, the World Bank is now forecasting a 20% drop in remittances from or to low and middle income countries. That would mean the number would go from $554 billion seen in 2019 to $445 billion in this year. And let me let up half of a pause to soak that in. 20% drop, which is something we haven't seen in several, well, we haven't seen. But now, there's still the concept of trust and how to send monies, maybe even more so now. And we're dealing with changes in technology, the use of cryptocurrency and digital currencies that are gaining momentum on a country-specific platform, which is really interesting. While it's a global shift and a global change, we are seeing that some countries are specifically using digital currencies. And kind of to make this story as complete as possible, setting the stage and bringing some good discussion points, our research has really heavily delved into policies and what is wrapped around remittances as far as policy goes. And from that public policy perspective, we obviously hope that policies are formed around human needs. But the ever-present question is, does practice shape policy, or does policy shape practice? We explored both Mexico and India as major recipients from U.S. remittances. And as you can see, there has been numerous policies that have been tried and currently in place, and multiple that are just plain not working, but still enforced. Obviously, I'm not going to give a full rundown of all the policies because we would be here for hours and days on end. But feel free to take snapshots or read the slide later for further source points. A few examples that I just wanted to highly mention is how some things aren't working, or some things are rather being shaped, practices being shaped by policy, like the Foreign Market Act in India from 1999, where limitations are being placed on validated NGOs and blacklisted organizations. And this isn't even taking into consideration the costs associated with approved actors. I provide a little definition of actors. I think most people on this call probably know, but when we're talking about actors, we're talking about the banks, the MTOs or money transfer organizations, India Post, for example. but limitations are really met with the remitter, for the remitter, on how much money will actually make it to the destination, given overhead, given transfer costs, given middleman payments. But on the other hand, there have been some initiatives, particularly in the Mexican landscape, that have attempted to aid, and I do say attempted, but nonetheless, attempted to aid in transfers of money. So after the Partnership for Prosperity, in 2001, we saw that the Directo a Mexico in 2003, connecting the U.S. Federal Reserve and Bank of America, was formed, actually operating in 2004. But the issue here is that while it allowed for ease of money transfers at a lower cost, it was formed, it was set up, and then no data, no research, no further updates were really conducted on it. So again, maybe that is a huge limitation of some of these programs, but we have definitely found that has been an issue on many of the policies. They're formed, they're executed, and then they are just sitting there being enforced, but we don't know the wraparound of them. And on a final kind of tickler in the policy lens, grassroots efforts, both philanthropic and advocacy oriented, have definitely risen over the last decade and have become one of the most visible forms of support, specifically in Mexican homegrown associations that aim at supporting the migrant, but also are collected based on community origin. And many of us on the call have obviously heard, probably participated in some sort of community organization like this. Out of specifically Mexican homegrown organizations, the Tres por Uno program derived, which was a public, or is a public-private partnership aimed to develop sustainable working programs that ended up spreading across all of the Mexican states. But one thing that I think would be most relevant to continue this conversation on this call and on this book talk is that we wanted to take a slight turn from our direct book work to discuss the here and the now, the global situation, the pandemic, the virus, the travel bans that are impacting remittances on a large scale. And as I mentioned, in April 2020, the World Bank put out a quick brief on remittances and migration in light of COVID-19, and it's definitely worth the read. But with that, I'm going to hand over the mic to Dr. Khan, where he can kind of bring us a little more full circle on today and now, and shore up a little bit more of the discussion. Dr. Khan?
Thank you, Daisha. Yeah, I'm sure all of you have heard and read some of the recent updates that have happened since COVID-19 has struck. And in the interest of time, what I'll do is just talk very quickly about the fact that many countries, including India, have not really put in place too many policies that are helping return migrants, unfortunately. And that, I think, is something that needs to be looked at. And of course, we can tackle this in the Q&A. But in the interest of time, I want to pass it on to Dr. Roy Germano for his presentation, and then we can circle back and discuss the current situation as it's unfolding.
Thanks. So I will speak briefly about my book. It's called Outsourcing Welfare, How the Money Immigrants Send Home Contributes to Stability in Developing Countries. I'll just actually send out, there's a link to the Amazon page for the book in case you're interested in checking it out or purchasing it. And then also I'll send out a link to my website where you can learn a little bit about the work that I've done over the years on migration issues. So I've started this project, going back into the early 2000s, really when I was a waiter in Chicago in my early 20s. I started working with cooks and busboys in the kitchen of a Chicago restaurant and was hearing stories about remittances every day with these folks that I worked with. And what I tended to hear was that people were sending money back to pay for their family members' health care, for their family members' education, so that their family members could buy food. They were sending money back in the wake of economic shocks. Their farms had gone under back in Mexico or in Central America, and they needed some sort of income supplement. So I later went to the University of Texas at Austin for my PhD and did survey research in Mexico, where I collected data on remittances, how they're used, why people send them, and how it affects the attitudes and perceptions of people that receive them. And so that project was the foundation of my book, Outsourcing Welfare, which was published by Oxford University Press in 2018. And the central argument of the book is that to some degree, international migrants have replaced national governments. So if you're working in the remittance industry, you are part of a global system in which individuals are sending welfare or guaranteeing the welfare of their family members, oftentimes in places where governments aren't doing so. And I think it's a really impressive practice that's occurred here, where individuals risk their lives, they sacrifice and separate themselves from their family in order to pick up the slack in situations where governments themselves aren't doing all they can do to guarantee a basic standard of living for their people. So that's the sort of main thrust of the book. I analyze data from Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Also conducted numerous interviews with people living in the Mexican countryside, which also served as the foundation for a documentary film that I released some years ago called The Other Side of Immigration. So that's all I'll say, and maybe we could some more could come out in the Q&A.
But I want to say something. I want to step in and say something, because it was what I was impressed when I read Roy's book, and IMTC bought some copies, and I think I have 2 or 3 more than if you write me. Of course, you can buy it, but if you want, I have 2 or 3 that I can send to anyone that wants it. Is the fact that of remittances as bringing stability to systems, to political systems, to countries, and that's a very, very interesting fact, because I've been, most of you know, but I've been in this industry for 30 years, and listening to Daisha talk about the term remittances, I mean, I can tell so many stories about, what do you do, and me explaining. I remember especially one meeting with DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency in Miami, one meeting maybe 20 years ago, in which I was explaining, look, no, this migrants exist. They do send money. It's not money laundering. I can take you, come with me. I'll show you people lining up. They wouldn't understand it. They wouldn't believe that it was true. And I was, look, I'm not making it up. That's what I do. This is the business. And they just, of course, they just wanted to see, okay, how was all of this part of a big scheme to launder money and using people to send money? And I was like, I don't know what to tell you, talk to the people in line, ask them. I mean, they're real, they send money. That's what we do. We get faxes from these companies and we pay them on the other side, and we try to settle any way we can. And so it is, the movement, and because it's a cultural thing, we understand. And I remember this Irish person in the World Bank saying, look, when we left Ireland, when I was young, I was 18. He's like, bye-bye, Dad, bye-bye, Mom, I love you. We never send money back. It was not expected from us. It was, it's a cultural thing. So Hispanics and Latinos and Africans and Indians. I mean, there's the cultural aspect of sending remittances is just a fascinating thing. And I want to say that thing in your book, Roy, was very interesting for me, because I never seen it from that point of view, just until I met you. And I said, hey, how did I miss that? How did I miss that? I'm opinionated in many things, but I never had seen that side of remittances. And that has shifted my way of looking at things when I see remittances and situations. And of course, many political situations have caused migration to propelled migrations, civil wars or revolutionary situations, and we can say Cuba, and we can say Nicaragua, and we can say Salvador too, even Colombia with all the, and Mexico with the violence, internal violence, that propels migration. Yes, that's a fact. But how all these migrants sending money kind of prevents for let's say this unrest. And I want you to say a little bit about that.
Yeah, so think about it today, you know, we hear in the United States all the time about the new unemployment numbers coming out, but the unemployed in the United States can file for unemployment insurance. Imagine if that unemployment insurance wasn't there, or imagine if there was no Medicare, no Medicaid, no Social Security. What would people do? Without a safety net, we can imagine here in the United States that there would be a lot of unrest. We're already seeing all kinds of social and political instability as it is with these social safety nets in place. So this is how I think of remittances, is that they're the unemployment compensation in countries where there is no unemployment compensation, or they're the Medicare, the Medicaid, or the Social Security in systems that don't have those robust social safety nets. So they help people make it through difficult times, which then reduces the possibility of social and political instability and potentially uprisings, revolutions, all kinds of instability that would be possible if people found themselves in an extremely desperate, economically unstable position.
Great. Very
thanks, Hugo. I'm so honored that you read the book and that IMTC bought so many copies. It was great to be at IMTC a few years ago, and we had a table set up, and people were lining up. It was a real honor to be able to present the book there at IMTC. And,
I just think that we need to create those bridges, and this is what we're here between industry and academia. That's why IORM is for, and that's why this virtual roundtable is for. We're also thinking of helping students conduct research for projects in the graduate school, so we can help get some of these companies in the industry to help. We were discussing data, and I know, the great effort the World Bank and Dilip Ratha and his team do to collect that information. But we know that there's a lot of information that researchers need, and we're going to try to work with this, and I'll do my best because of my connections to the industry to help that things to happen. So I just say here that to all the companies in this industry, let's work together. I mean, we're trying to bridge the gap between academia and industry, regulators and industry, even academia and regulators. That sometimes, I work with regulators, and I most of the time I try to explain the business and the tendencies, and it's complex. Some of the fintechs that come to me, I explain that to me again. How is the flow of funds? It's amazing the amount of innovation. So it's hard for regulators to understand, to keep up. So we just have to work together, because at the end, as Daisha said, it's people that are affected. It's people are affected by so many policies that are not thought of in the big context of things. We miss sometimes the stories. I know that that's normal in society. We cannot answer everybody's needs, but I think we have to do better.
Hugo, what you're saying too, though, it's a two-way street, because on one hand, the industry can help out academia with data and other resources, but in turn, I think academia can provide new insights to industry. Just like you said, you hadn't thought of this concept that I came up with in my book, and perhaps there are other concepts out there that academics are talking about in their own circles. We all know that academia tends to be very insular, and our journal articles are, behind paywalls and all that stuff, and they don't really get out to the public as much as they should. But this could be an opportunity to pull some of those insights out. And academics are doing all kinds of work on remittances, both ethnographic research, where they'll be embedded living in communities with remittance recipients for years and years, to people who are analyzing data sources that industry might not even know exist. There are all kinds of surveys in the social sciences that, while they may not be surveys about migration and remittances, they sometimes include questions about migration and remittances on the surveys, and those surveys and that kind of data could be helpful to industry, academia, nonprofits.
Great.
Yeah.
There's a great question here that I want to throw, and this is for Daisha, and is that the surge of the use of cryptocurrencies. You mentioned it, and we know that even with Cuba, Venezuela, well, there's been some articles on that too, but we've seen in this industry mostly cryptocurrencies used for companies using the settlement side. But I know a lot of users are doing it, you know, are managing cryptocurrencies. We had a virtual roundtable about Philippines and how even there's little entrepreneurs using cryptocurrencies and helping neighbors buy things or send money here and there. So it is like the one who understands the cryptocurrency ecosystem, helping others send money or receive money. And of course, it depends the corridor and the price of Bitcoin. But Daisha, is anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Denise, for that question. So I'm going to probably let Dr. Khan answer most of it, but I wanted to touch on something that Hugo said, and I think that is really important, is the understanding of cryptocurrencies and what Bitcoin even is, and that I think that is a huge area that we haven't talked about much, and we actually don't touch on it too much within our book, but it's definitely relevant. Is in order to use any sort of digital currencies, there has to be an understanding, and there has not, to the best of my knowledge, been any sort of primers for the person to use, for the remitter to use. It's if you know those big companies, if you know somebody within the industry to help you out, right? Like you can't just say, okay, here's my dollar, now what do I go do with it here? But so I think that we have a huge gap that's been developed and is coming apart even further into an even more gap of understanding what it is in general and how to utilize it. So I just wanted to touch on that point in Hugo's, but then I'll hand it over to Dr. Khan so he can answer more deeply Denise's question. But it is it is this interesting cryptocurrencies and how they could be utilized, maybe even leveraged in the future. But sorry, go ahead, Khan.
Thank you, Daisha. Quick note on that, Denise. I think there's a lot of scope for using cryptos for development, and I think the bigger framework here, I think we need to understand is use of cryptocurrencies, right? How much are they being used, and which corridors, as Hugo rightly pointed out. I think there is increasing use of cryptocurrencies for remittances in certain corridors. I mean, if you look at certain crisis situations, look at Venezuela, right? Look at Yemen. In fact, personal anecdote to illustrate this use, one of my friends in Virginia Tech, her family is still in Sana'a, which is the capital of Yemen. And for those of you who are in the industry, you know, that's one of the more expensive corridors to send money. So she, in fact, not that she uses cryptocurrencies, but one of the last conversations I had with her was that she was increasingly getting frustrated because she works in the US and most of her family is in Sana'a facing a very, very disastrous humanitarian situation. And she was complaining about how much it costs. Sometimes it's not even possible to send money to Yemen, given all the restrictions. And so in those situations, I think cryptocurrencies can play a significant role. And I think adoption, again, each country and each region has its own intricacies. And we cannot, again, it's a big topic to cover. But I will leave you all with the thought saying, yes, there is definitely a potential. There is, depending on adoption of cryptos in those regions as well as countries, and how the governments perceive them, like what role the relations. Do they normalize the usage of cryptocurrencies, or do they see them as problematic? I think that's the framework that we need to analyze. And a lot of work to be done, both for academics, for the industry, as well as regulators, to sort of normalize them and say, okay, they have a place in our society. We need to accept them because people are using it. So I think if we approach it from that perspective, I think things can get better, and probably they have a bigger role to play in economic development.
Yes, no, and definitely it is being used. I have had talks with a company called, for example, Bitstop, who has Bitcoin machines, and they are very conscious because of the know your customer, how they've seen Venezuelans buying. They don't know exactly what are they doing with it exactly, but they can see a little bit of these uses, and it is happening much more than we think. Totally. I mean, because I've been talking with people who are watching this and how they're using it, even companies, not only individuals, but and I think regulation is coming. It's coming along. I think the U.S. Has done quite a bit. We're waiting for Europe. It's coming along. The Brexit situation has changed the thing, but regulation is coming on. Of course, there is every country is trying to figure it out how it does it. But even though they don't have a regulation in place, it's being used worldwide. Bitcoin is being used worldwide, and not only Bitcoin, there's other coins too. And I think it's that use that is driving all of this. So now there is a question here from Eric. Thank you for the question. That the World Bank estimated a drop, and Daisha told us about that 20% in remittances this year, and that we've seen growth, especially Mexico and some countries. And yes, that was the initial estimate. I think that especially the Remittance Community Task Force, where I worked along Leon in this, and IFAD, working on remittances and this COVID situation, it's been surprising for a lot of us to see how resilient remittances are, how they have kind of bounced back. And there is a speculation of why. Because we saw it in the 2008 crisis. We know that companies, when they begin hiring again, they normally do it with migrants first, instead of formalizing, and because of the safety nets that Roy was discussing, and migrants don't have that safety nets, they have to look for a job wherever they are. I mean, they can't. They just shift professions. In 2008, it was very clear when there was this crisis in construction in California, Mexicans started going to other neighbor states to find work. We saw it, and even that created a surge in companies that were in the neighboring states. So that was a very fast shift. You know, it's not like we took a year. No, it took a month, because one tells the other, and word of mouth in the migrant communities is a big thing. So we know that this is happening. It is strange. I don't know if any of you want to mention something about that, but the figures from certain countries like Mexico, Guatemala, others, not to Philippines because of the Philippine situation. We discussed that in another virtual roundtable, but yes, remittances are quite resilient. I don't know. Any of you want to mention something? Daisha, I see you in your face.
Yeah, no, I will just touch on it briefly. So, and not a critique at all to the World Bank number there, but I think it's good that, we brought it up a little further, and thank you, Eric, for the question. But what's missing from the number is the people again. And this goes right back to one of our big arguments, not taking into consideration fully the resilience, as you mentioned, Hugo, of the actual people who are sending the money. and of those remitters. I mean, the ability to be able to move, as you mentioned, within the California crisis to a sister state, and then take up a whole new style of life, but still be able to have that connection to home and their motivation for it, I think is what we are also seeing here. And, you know, part of that number from the World Bank was based on the travel bans that have been put in place, have been up and down, that we've seen over the last several months, and the inability to physically travel places. But I do maybe in some respects hope that that's not going to be a realistic number come end of the year, but I think we have seen in country specific receivers still getting the remittances and still needing them, of course, but also those, at least from the US perspective, being able to change the careers or being able to change their locations easily and still make that familial commitment.
Great.
I've been thinking a
Roy.
lot. This question's been coming up a lot. Thanks, Eric, for your question. There's a few ways to look at this. One is in terms of in the Mexico case, the exchange rate. So I think it went from 18 pesos to 24 pesos very quickly. And we all know that migrants are strategic with when and how they send money back. The other thing to look at is, are some remittances currently being counted that weren't being counted before? So for example, were people traveling back to their home countries in the past with cash, and now they're not traveling back, so now they're remitting that money electronically? Are people increasingly using services and ways of sending money that are easier to count because of the pandemic, so they're not doing as much, they're on apps more, they're on the computer more, and it's easier to count that money. So maybe some remittances are just being counted that weren't being counted before. Another issue to look at is supply of remittances and demand for them. So I think the supposition was that the supply of remittances, meaning the money that migrants earned in their jobs, would go way down. But as Hugo said, this was really different than 2008, that a lot of the migrant industries, or the industries that migrants work in, weren't hit so hard this time around. And in fact, in some ways, the industries that migrants work in were amped up a bit. You know, essential workers, people working on farms, in meat packing plants. So perhaps the supply didn't go down as much as was thought. There was stimulus ready to go. There was unemployment insurance ready to go. Whereas in 2008, the crisis seemed to come out of nowhere and governments were ill prepared. And then the last factor is the demand for remittances. So the pandemic has hit a lot of remittance receiving countries very hard, countries that have not only seen normal economic activity obliterated, but add tourism to that, where tourism has gone to zero in many places. So people need remittances more than ever as well. So I think it's a perfect storm of factors that has sort of turned this prediction by the World Bank on its head.
Very well said. Very well said.
And if I may quickly add, Hugo, at least for slightly not focusing on North America, but looking at the Gulf countries and South Asia, those of you who follow that region probably know that there has been a complete travel moratorium. Like there have been no international flights from the Gulf countries to parts of South Asia, except for those who are leaving the countries permanently. So it's like a one-way flight. They're not allowed to come back unless and until the pandemic is over. So those countries have handled this in a very, very different manner than Europe and North America. So my sense is that remittances from those regions have sort of been impacted, and people are feeling stuck, I think in many cases, because of lack of movement. Even if people have lost their jobs in those countries, they have found either alternate employment, or they're surviving on their savings and sending what they can. So I think across countries is a very, very different. Each region has its own dynamic, its own intricacies, depending on the policies that the governments are making. And I think when we look at these big numbers, and I think, again, going back to the argument we make, numbers, I think you need the context. Context is extremely important. And a more nuanced reading of what's going on almost a week-to-week, day-to-day basis is needed. And I think hopefully the work that we are doing through IRM and others will help inform that on a more regular basis. In addition to all that's out there, again, we are not criticizing any sources. We're just saying we're adding on to that to offer a more comprehensive understanding.
Great, great, very well said. And I just, before our time is up, I just shared the link, Remittance Stories. This is something that we have done at IMTC, and it's just collecting stories. Like, so I thought about that. I don't think I've shared that with Sabith or Daisha or Roy, but this is just some interviews we did to senders. That was part of a small project to inform, just humanize all of this, and we always come to that. I mean, the pandemic has really changed many things. Of course, the going to digital, or the question here, the remittances to mobile accounts, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the increase in digital. But it's so interesting, because even agents, cash agents have found ways to digitally serve their own customers, even if they are not part of the digital space. So there's so much creativity there, and because migrants have always been pushed to be creative in the work they seek, in how they work, how they manage their documents, their papers, whether they can, whether they don't. I mean, it's always looking for the little cracks to be able to work and send money. I think that this pandemic is forcing all that to happen, and it will be very interesting to see what comes out of that. And as Roy was saying, there is perfect storm in all these things coming together, and there's still a lot to understand. And yes, the impact of the pandemic in receiving countries have forced senders to send and help more. Just a little fact that I shared some weeks ago, agents in Florida telling me how they've seen packages increase tremendously being sent from the U.S. And this is migrant packages, you know, like the Philippines have done forever with their Balacan boxes, but it's just sending food, which never happened. Like we're saying, look, there's food being sent to Colombia. It's never happened before. Why? Well, maybe because the mother is there. They want to send some food to her, so she doesn't have to go maybe outside of the neighborhood to find. So there's a lot of change in behavior that the pandemic has brought, and we're still just kind of assembling all these anecdotes, these human stories to try to explain the numbers. And I think we'll continue with that. So our time is up. I really thank so much the three of you. I think for me it was so interesting. I love to moderate because I just kind of learned while doing this. Thank you for all the participants. This has been recorded. We will place it. We will share the link. We will probably do a condensed version of this for the ones that only have maybe 10 minutes to get the gist of things. So thank you very much. Thank you, and Jennifer.
Yes, we have prepared a quick poll for our audience. We want to know what do you think based on today's interesting discussion.
You're gonna share it?
Yeah,
okay. Oh, that's Daisha asking that question. So remittances help preserve traditional culture. So just submit your answer. And I was gonna answer, but it says host and panelists cannot vote.
That's
so,
right.
So we cannot vote. So we'll get it is an interesting thing. And I want to say something while the results come up. It is interesting how migrants also start building their own little businesses out of the connection with their country. For example, how they, for example, say, okay, I'm going to bring something that I cannot find here, a spice, a brand of cookies, and then that's how all this neighborhood tiendas or start coming out. It's just migrants saying, hey, I can buy that, and I'm linking this to tradition and culture, because it is that too, you know. It is how do you also keep that connection, you know. And the parties, the seasons, like you said, Cinco de Mayo, por ejemplo, for Mexicans, all these things just continue in the diaspora. And can you share
Yeah.
the results?
Yeah, we'll share the results now.
Okay. Well, Daisha, you can see this.
Yes.
We can continue the discussion. Well, the unsure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
day.
Very much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Hugo. Thank you, Sabith and Roy and Daisha.
Thank you, Jen.
As a reminder, IMTC World 2020, it's coming up on November 16th through November 19th. So please stay tuned. We can't wait to share the more exciting news. Please also remember that you can become a member of platinum.net, where we are building a great things together, and we want to welcome you to our community. Thank you so much, and see you in our next Virtual Roundtable series.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.